He called me expired right there at dinner, as if I wasn't even sitting there, as if I were nothing. It happened just after the papers were signed. Fred had already moved on, of course, moved into a shiny new chapter with Jasmine, a 29-year-old woman who, to hear Fred tell it, was the very embodiment of youth and vitality. I'd spent 35 years building a life with that man. 35 years, and just like that, I was old news tossed aside like yesterday's bread. But you know what? I'm not expired. I'm seasoned. I've lived a full life, a rich life, if you ask me. And for all their fancy Instagram posts and filters, Jasmine and Fred don't know a thing about what it means to grow, to live, and to endure. But some women, well, we don't just fade. We don't fade into the background while someone else takes our place. We wait. And when the time comes, we remind the world who we are, what we've been through, and just how much we still have to offer. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I want to know where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm just curious if I'm the only one who's felt that sting, that cold feeling of being replaced when you're not quite ready to leave. If this resonates with you, or if you want to hear more, consider subscribing. It helps more people understand what it really means when a woman, especially one my age, has to pick up the pieces and start over. And believe me, starting over is something I've gotten good at. You see, the thing about getting older is that you learn how to keep going. You learn how to rise from the ashes, even when they think you've burned out. It wasn't just the word expired that got to me, it was the casual way Fred said it, like I wasn't even in the room, like I didn't matter at all anymore. He said it right after the papers were signed, just as if that was all it took to erase everything we had built together. "You're a good woman, Evelyn," he said, but those words were hollow, empty. And when he looked at me, I saw it, the distance, the lack of care. "But I need more life in my life," he added. He made it sound like I was just some old, tired piece of furniture he didn't want to bother with anymore. And there she was, Jasmine, sitting across from him at that same table where we had shared so many dinners, so many memories. She wasn't even trying to hide the smug look on her face. I suppose she thought it would make me feel small, make me feel inferior. But it didn't. No, it just made me realize exactly what I was dealing with. A man too selfish to see the value of the life we had built, and a woman who didn't know a thing about real life, real love, or real commitment. I remember sitting there listening to Fred talk about how she was the future, how she made him feel alive again like a teenager. And I just sat there numb because deep down I knew it wasn't about me anymore. He was already looking past me, already seeing someone else as his new world. It wasn't the first time he'd hurt me, but this dismissal felt different. It stung in a way I couldn't ignore. The word expired echoed in my head for days after that dinner. They thought I would fade into the background, just quietly accept what had happened, like some dutiful ex-wife. They thought I would smile and nod and let them have their perfect little Instagram life. But that's not who I am. Not anymore. I'd been married to Fred for 35 years. I had sacrificed, compromised, and loved him with everything I had. And for what? So he could turn around and replace me with someone younger, someone who could fit into the image he was trying to sell the world. But here's the thing Fred didn't understand. I wasn't just going to disappear. I wasn't going to sit back and let them rewrite our history. Let them take my home, my memories, and my dignity without a fight. 3 weeks later, I saw the post. Jasmine's Instagram was already plastered with pictures of them, holding hands, clinking champagne glasses, posing in matching white outfits, the perfect shiny new couple. Their dream home, they called it, as if they'd built it themselves from scratch. But it wasn't their dream home, it was my home. The one Fred and I had painstakingly built over the years with all the arguments and the laughter and the small joys that came from making a life together. They thought they could just sweep in, fill it with their filtered smiles and curated posts, and take over. I saw them in every picture, standing in the kitchen, my kitchen, laughing in front of the fireplace I had spent hours tending to, taking photos of the porch swing I had carefully saved for. They were making it theirs like it had never been mine to begin with. Jasmine, with her perfectly manicured nails and her bright eyes pointing at the antique furniture Fred and I had picked out together, making it seem like she had any right to it. And then, of course, the hashtags. Our dream home, new beginnings, blessed. It was all so perfect that it was sickening. They didn't understand that a house isn't just a house. It's not just a backdrop for your perfect little online narrative. It's a life. It's memories that you can't just scrub away with a fancy Instagram filter. They thought they could just take over my life, erase my years of history, and make it theirs. I wasn't in any of the pictures, of course. Not that they'd want me to be. I was just the old, faded woman in the background. But that didn't bother me. No, what bothered me was that they truly thought I would just sit back and smile while they hijacked everything I had left. They thought they could make their new life my old life without me even so much as raising an eyebrow. But I wasn't going to just fade away. Not this time. I'd let them have their filtered happiness for a moment, their Instagram-worthy moments, But I knew something they didn't. They didn't know the real story behind this house. They didn't know the nights spent talking about the future, or the days spent fixing up the garden, or the quiet moments Fred and I shared that meant so much more than any of their new beginnings ever would. I wasn't a ghost in this house, and I wasn't a ghost in my own life. The moment I saw those photos, I knew I had to take action. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about me. It was about taking back control of my own narrative, of the life I had built. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they hadn't taken this. I wasn't going to let them. It's funny how you can let things slide for a while. You can pretend like everything's fine, even when it's not. You smile, nod, keep your head down, let people walk all over you, all the while thinking it's the right thing to do. But there comes a point when you just can't pretend anymore. When the anger that's been sitting quietly inside you finally erupts and you realize you've had enough. And that's what happened the day they showed up at my door, Fred and Jasmine, standing there in front of the house that I had built like it was theirs for the taking. Jasmine was wearing one of her oversized, trendy hats, the kind she probably got for free from some brand that wanted her to wear it for the gram. She had this smile on her face. This looked like she was doing me some kind of favor just by being there. Fred, of course, was trying to play it off like everything was just fine, like nothing had changed. But we both knew better. I had just finished my morning coffee when I saw them standing there, and I knew right then this wasn't a casual visit. This wasn't just them dropping by to check in. No, this was their attempt to take over. Again, "Hey, Ev," Fred said, his voice too casual, like we were still just having a conversation about the weather. "You still in the house, right?" He was pretending to be all friendly, but there was an edge to his voice, a hint of something that told me he was about to ask for something. I looked at him, at Jasmine standing next to him, pretending to be interested in the old wooden steps like she wasn't planning to tear the place down. "Yeah, still breathing, Fred," I replied. My voice was dry, colder than the autumn air outside. He didn't even flinch at my sarcasm. He just gave that fake laugh of his, the one that used to drive me crazy. Well, Jasmine and I were talking, and we were thinking maybe we could buy something bigger, a forever home. But the market's tight. You've got a lot of equity in this place, Ev. I did the math. His words hit me like a slap to the face. They weren't asking for a favor, not really. They were trying to figure out how to take what they thought they deserved. I didn't say anything right away. I just let the silence hang between us, heavy with the weight of everything that had already happened, the audacity of it all, the sheer nerve. Jasmine piped up then, as if she were the one making all the decisions. "It's got great bones, though," she said, inspecting the porch like she owned it. "Needs a little updating, but I can totally see it. Imagine what we could do with this place, Fred. I'd love to document the whole thing on my Instagram. We could call it From Dated to Divine." She looked at me, that saccharine smile spreading across her face. "And don't worry, Evelyn," she added, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We'll let you stay here for a while until you find something more manageable, maybe a nice condo or something." The patronizing tone in her voice made my blood run cold. A condo, something manageable? It was as if she were talking about a fragile old woman who couldn't handle her own life. As if I couldn't handle my home. I'd had enough. I stood up straighter, all the years of hurt and frustration bubbling up in my chest. "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're not doing anything to this house. Not now. Not ever." Fred looked at me bewildered, like he couldn't quite process what I'd just said. "Come on, Evelyn. Don't be like this. You always said we built this place together. You wanted it to be special." "Yeah, I did," I said, my words cutting through the air. "But you've already taken everything, Fred. My heart, my trust, and now you want my home too? No, this is mine. This always was. And if you think you're going to waltz in here and turn it into your little project, you're wrong." Jasmine's smile faltered, her perfectly made-up face twisting with confusion. Fred, on the other hand, looked embarrassed, like he'd expected me to cave in, to roll over and let them do whatever they wanted. "Well, I just thought, maybe we could refinance it," Fred stammered, trying to save face. "Make it work for us. Keep it in the family, so to speak." "Family," I repeated, my voice low and deadly calm. "You're the family that left." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Jasmine's face went from confusion to irritation. Fred's eyes darted nervously between me and the door. I could see his mind racing, calculating, trying to figure out how to fix this, how to manipulate the situation in his favor. But I wasn't giving in. Not this time. I didn't need to say anything else. I simply turned and walked away, leaving them standing there on the porch, stunned by my refusal to bow down to them. As I shut the door behind me, I realized something. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about my dignity, my pride, my life, and I wasn't going to let them take any more from me. The day they came to my door was a turning point. I felt it in the air and the silence that followed our exchange. Fred and Jasmine had crossed a line. I had been patient for so long, allowing myself to be dismissed, to be erased from the life we'd shared. But that day, I drew a line in the sand and I wasn't going to let them cross it. That evening, after they left, I sat down in the living room, the space that Fred and I had once shared. The furniture was the same. The walls still held the same pictures, but something had changed. It was like I was seeing everything with new eyes. Eyes that had been open to the reality that I had been living in for too long, and I was done with it. I thought back on everything, the way Fred had just walked out of our marriage, not even trying to salvage what we had built, the way Jasmine had so casually taken my place, not even bothering to respect the years we had shared. They were trying to erase me, to take my past and turn it into something else, but I wasn't going to let them, not anymore. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the yard I had tended to for decades. The rose bush my mother had given me, the garden that had bloomed every year, no matter how hard life got. That was the thing about flowers. They kept growing, even in the most difficult conditions, and so would I. I realized then that I couldn't just sit here anymore. I had let Fred and Jasmine think they could take what was mine, that they could claim my history, my memories, my life, but I was done being passive. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. It was time for me to act. It wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my strength, my future. I wasn't going to let Fred and Jasmine define me. I was going to take control of the situation, take control of my life. I reached for the phone and dialed Letitia's number. Letitia was a friend I had known for years, sharp as a tack, no nonsense, and always had my back. She was also a damn good lawyer, and I needed her expertise. Letitia, I said, my voice steady. It's time. It's time for me to remind Fred exactly what I'm capable of. I'm done being the forgotten woman in this story. I'm taking back control. Letitia didn't even hesitate. You've waited long enough, Evelyn, she said, her voice warm but firm. You've got the right to fight for what's yours. Let's make sure they don't get away with this. I knew what I had to do now. I wasn't going to sit back while they took everything I had built. I was going to sell the house. It wasn't just about getting rid of the memories. It was about reclaiming my life, about letting go of the past on my own terms. I wasn't going to let Fred and Jasmine take everything from me, including the last piece of my dignity. I was going to sell the house, and I was going to move on. The past was gone, but the future, my future, was still mine to write. The next few days were a whirlwind. I could feel the weight of the decision settling in, but this time it wasn't heavy in the way it had been before. It was freeing. I wasn't dragging around the past anymore. I was stepping into a future that I would control, and that future didn't include Fred. It didn't include Jasmine either. Letitia wasted no time. She connected me with Miles Dupree, a real estate agent who knew how to keep things quiet. I liked him the moment I met him, sharp, professional, and with an air of discretion that made me feel like I was in good hands. Miles didn't need to know all the details, didn't need to hear the history between Fred and me. He just needed to know that I wanted to sell and that I needed to do it quickly and efficiently. You've got a beautiful place here, Miles said as we walked through the house. I can see why you've held on to it for so long, but I can also tell you're ready to move on. I didn't have to explain any further. He understood. The house was mine and it was time for someone else to have it, someone who would treat it with the respect it deserved, not as a backdrop for an Instagram story, but as a place that held real memories, real life. We walked from room to room, and each one seemed to echo with the memories of my past, but it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a chapter that had ended, and I was ready to turn the page. The kitchen where I spent so many mornings making breakfast for Fred and Desmond, the living room where we once laughed, and where we eventually fell silent, the garden where I had planted the rose bush my mother had given me, a small piece of her I had carried with me all these years. I had lived here, I had loved here, and now it was time for someone else to build their own memories within these walls. Miles took notes, clicking his pen as he moved from room to room. We'll get you what this place deserves, he said. His confidence was reassuring. He wasn't just doing his job, he understood the weight behind the sale. He knew that this wasn't just a real estate transaction for me. It was a way to close the door on a chapter that had dragged on far too long. The paperwork was done within a week. Miles worked fast, expertly handling the sale, making sure there were no delays, no hitches. I didn't have to deal with a single thing. The house was sold, a clean sale, no mess, no complications. I didn't feel relief. Not exactly, but I did feel something. Something light, something that hadn't been there before. There was a weight lifting from my chest, a sense of closure. The house was no longer mine, but it had never really been Fred's, not in the way he thought it was. It had been a part of my life, a witness to everything I had been through, and now it was someone else's turn to make their memories. Fred and Jasmine had no idea. They were still busy with their social media posts, still playing out their new life, still pretending they were the only people who mattered in the story of that house. They thought they could take it all. They thought they could erase me, but I knew better. The day I left the house, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't filled with tears or any kind of grand farewell. It was just me quietly walking through the room, saying my goodbyes in the way I knew best, with dignity and strength. I dressed carefully, simple but elegant, a navy dress that had been tucked away in my closet for a while. It wasn't new, but it was perfect for the occasion. I made my bed one last time, smoothing the sheets as I always had, with the same care I had shown the house for all these years. There was no rush, no frantic packing. I wasn't leaving in shame. I was leaving because I had decided it was time to move on. I walked through the rooms one last time, letting my fingers brush against the old wood of the staircase railing, the countertops where Fred and I once stood side by side, cooking meals together. I lingered for a moment in the kitchen, remembering all the mornings I had spent here, the coffee brewing, the soft hum of life before everything fell apart. The living room, too. That was where we had spent so many quiet nights, where I had sat beside Fred, waiting for him to come home after a long day. The place where, despite all the love we shared, I'd eventually come to realize that he was no longer there with me, even if he was physically present. And then there was the garden, my garden. I had planted so much there over the years, flowers, trees, memories, the rose bush my mother had given me, still standing tall, blooming beautifully despite everything that had happened. It was as if the garden itself was telling me, it's okay to let go. That small, stubborn act of life, flourishing despite everything, was exactly how I felt in that moment. I wasn't broken. I was still here, still growing. I knew I wasn't coming back. Not to this house, not to this life, but I didn't feel sadness. I felt something more profound. I felt peace, a quiet, deeply satisfying peace. This house had given me so much, but it no longer fit me. The walls that once felt warm and full of life now felt like they were closing in. It was time to move forward, time to start fresh. When I closed the door behind me, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already said goodbye, in the only way that mattered, by walking away with my head held high, knowing that I had made the right decision for me. Miles Dupree was waiting outside, his car parked a little down the street as we had planned. I slid into the passenger seat of his sedan, and for the first time in years, I felt light, like I had shed an old skin that no longer served me. We didn't speak much on the drive. There wasn't anything to say. The weight of the past had finally lifted, and the road ahead was open. I could feel the changes inside me, in the way I carried myself, in the way I looked at the world. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. We reached my new place, a small apartment in a quieter part of town. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. I opened the door to my new life, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. There were no grand celebrations, no dramatic gestures, just me in my new space, my new beginning. I unpacked my things, rearranged a few boxes, and then I sat down in the quiet of my new home, listening to the soft hum of life outside. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The days after I moved into my new place were quieter than I expected. I thought there would be phone calls, texts, maybe even some attempt by Fred or Jasmine to make contact, but there was nothing. No apologies, no desperate attempts to get me back into their tangled mess, just silence. And that silence, it was the sweetest thing I'd ever known. Desmond, my son, was the only one who reached out, and even then it took him a little while. He sent an email, one full of carefully chosen words. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know things were this bad. I should have been there for you." I sat at my kitchen table and read his message slowly. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, not since everything went down, and though his words were an apology, I could tell he was struggling, caught between his father and me, unsure of where to place his loyalty. I understood. He was younger and he had been caught in the middle of a situation that wasn't easy for anyone. I thought about it for a long moment before I replied. "Desmond, I'm not angry with you. You didn't know what was going on and you didn't have to pick sides, but I need you to understand something. This wasn't just about the house or Fred or Jasmine. This was about me, and I'm okay. Really, I am." I hit send and immediately felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't going to hold on to any more anger, any more disappointment. Not with him, not with anyone. I had already made the decision to move on, and that included letting go of the small hurts that had piled up over the years. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. As for Fred and Jasmine, I never heard from them again. They probably assumed that as they had done with everything else, they could just move on and leave me in the past. But that was their mistake. They had underestimated me. They had thought I was the one who would fade away, but instead I found my strength. I reclaimed my life, piece by piece, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their drama. Months went by, and the story of the house on Elm Street became a distant memory. Fred's new life with Jasmine, his carefully crafted social media posts, and their dream home didn't seem so shiny anymore. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances that Jasmine was having her own struggles. The perfect life she had expected to build was crumbling, just like Fred's promises had. There were rumors of financial trouble, of struggles they couldn't post about or filter away. I didn't take any pleasure in their unraveling. That wasn't the point. What mattered was that I had found peace. I had chosen to walk away, to leave behind the parts of me that were broken, and start fresh. The past was still there, but it no longer defined me. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the new owners of the house, the Petersons. They thanked me for being such a gracious seller and for making the transition as smooth as possible. They told me they were already making their own memories there, filling the rooms with laughter and love. There was a photo attached to the letter, a picture of their golden retriever, Lemon, lying on the porch swing that Fred and I had spent so many summers dreaming about. It was a simple photo, nothing fancy, but it hit me in a way I hadn't expected. The house had found its place, its true owners, and I had found mine. I tucked the letter away in a drawer, a small reminder that the story of my life wasn't finished yet. I still had many chapters to write. As for Desmond, he came to visit me a few weeks later. We met for coffee at a small cafe by the lake. It was a quiet conversation, no grand apologies or explanations, just two people who had been through a lot, learning how to move forward. "I get it now, Mom," he said, looking at me with a new understanding. "I see what you were trying to protect. I was young, but I see it now. I'm sorry for not standing up for you." I smiled, a genuine smile, and placed my hand on his. "You don't have to apologize, Desmond. You were doing the best you could. I've made peace with it all, and you should too." When he left, I felt a sense of quiet completion. No more questions, no more regrets, just a deep, steady peace. I heard that Fred and Jasmine's marriage didn't last, that the cracks in their perfect facade had finally shown. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't need to know the details. The story I needed to tell was my own, and I had written it in the way I chose. As I sat on my new balcony one evening, watching the city lights blink to life in the distance, I realized that I had never been expired. I had been evolving, growing, learning how to stand tall when life tried to knock me down. The world had counted me out, but I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I wasn't the woman I once was, but I was the woman I was always meant to be, and this time, I was finally living for myself.